or soul, as it's called, is something that you feel from within and you do it spontaneously. And it is not something that you learn to do. And it is not something that you read and you do it well.
Well, I guess he knew how to get to me because he wanted, which he always said, he wanted to control me. And if he couldn't control me, then he didn't want me around.
She said she got stomped in the face on the floor of Diddy's Escalade for the duration of a ride home. And she claimed throughout their time together that she felt, well, powerless to make the choice to escape.
Berry Gordy was Diddy's mentor, but once you see the truth behind their careers, you'll never see either of them the same way again.
I can't chase the culture, I can only lead the culture.
They discovered stars and changed music forever. But behind it all was a trail of broken artists, silenced women, and careers destroyed in the shadows.
She talked about how she felt frightened at many times, that he controlled her life, her career, her life, his life, everything about her, she said, was controlled.
This is the story Berry Gordy never wanted told. And the playbook Diddy followed to a T. From Motown to Bad Boy, this is the real cost of fame. And the blueprint of control that shaped black music across generations. Diddy didn't invent the mogul method. He studied it. Studied Berry Gordy's every move. The artist grooming, the wardrobe control, the forced romances, the silencing, everything Diddy became in the 90s.
So I got the idea that why don't I start an assembly line for singers and artists and bring them in, a kid off the street, unknown, and put them through a process and they come out a star.
Berry had already done in the 60s. Motown Records was more than a label. It was a machine. A glamorous, soulful, star-making machine with Berry Gordy at the controls. He chose the songs. He chose the outfits. He chose who got famous and who got erased. If you went against the system, your career didn't just slow down. It vanished. Just like Diddy allegedly blackballed artists like Danity Kane, Day 26, and even Total, Berry Gordy had his own trail of discarded stars. But none were more tragic than Diana Ross, Florence Ballard, and Teena Marie. To the public, Berry Gordy and Diana Ross appeared to be the ultimate Motown power couple. He was the founder of the label that transformed black music into a global phenomenon. She was the glamorous lead of the Supremes, Motown's crown jewel. Their chemistry was undeniable, on stage and off.
Whatever Berry Gordy is, I'm here.
But behind the glittering legacy was a much darker truth. A relationship riddled with manipulation, emotional abuse, and control. Diana Ross was only 15 years old when she first met Berry Gordy. By the time she rose to fame in her early 20s, Berry had already taken a particular interest in her. Their relationship quickly became both romantic and professional, and that dual dynamic created a deeply toxic environment where boundaries were blurred and power was one-sided. Berry Gordy was nearly 14 years older than Diana Ross. He was not just her boss, but the man who controlled the narrative of her entire career. As the creator of the Supremes' success, he began grooming Diana to become a solo star, pushing her to the front of the trio, and eventually isolating her from her groupmates, Mary Wilson and Florence Ballard. While this move was publicly framed as business strategy, many insiders have pointed out that Berry's romantic involvement with Diana heavily influenced these decisions. Diana was his favorite, and everyone at Motown knew it. But favoritism came at a cost. Behind the scenes, Berry reportedly used emotional manipulation to keep Diana under his thumb. According to various biographies, Diana lived in constant fear of disappointing him. He could be affectionate and generous one moment, then distant, cold, and cruel the next. That pattern of intermittent affection followed by rejection is a classic sign of emotional abuse. It kept her dependent on his approval. Former Motown insiders have described how Berry would often demean or belittle Diana in front of others, only to later console her in private. He also had a history of controlling her public image, fashion choices, and even who she could associate with, both socially and romantically. Diana reportedly had to ask permission or at least seek approval before making even basic decisions about her own life. One of the most telling examples of Berry's possessiveness was when he forced her into isolation during the height of her transformation into a solo act. While grooming her to become a crossover star, Berry moved Diana to Los Angeles, away from her Motown family in Detroit. She was surrounded by his chosen team, handlers, assistants, stylists, all of whom reported directly to him. That isolation gave Berry near complete control over her daily life. Even as Diana tried to establish her own identity, Berry kept tight control over her finances, career path, and recording output. Multiple sources allege that he withheld royalties and manipulated contracts, giving Diana less financial freedom than her fame deserved. This is a common tactic in abusive relationships, keeping the partner financially and emotionally dependent. The psychological toll on Diana Ross was real. Though she maintained a composed public image, several of her close friends noted that she often cried in private, felt anxious, and battled low self-worth, particularly when Berry would criticize her. The relationship became a cycle of reward and punishment. Worse still, Diana's elevation to solo diva under Berry's control created deep resentment within the Supremes.
From the moment that it was decided by Berry that Diane would take over all leads and that Florence and I would no longer sing lead, that problem was there.
Many blame Berry and Diana's tight alliance for that outcome. Mary Wilson, the other original Supreme, also spoke candidly in her memoir about how the favoritism shattered the group's dynamic and deeply hurt everyone involved. Even after their romantic relationship ended, Berry continued to wield power over Diana's life. Their daughter, Rhonda Ross Kendrick, was born in 1971, but Berry's paternity was kept secret for years. Diana was married to music executive Robert Silberstein at the time, and the truth was covered up for the sake of both reputations. Gordy didn't legally acknowledge Rhonda until she was an adult, although he was privately involved in her life. By the late 1980s, Diana had begun publicly distancing herself from Berry, choosing to reinvent herself outside the Motown machine. But even then, Berry's shadow loomed large. His presence at her concerts, award shows, and interviews remained symbolic of the control he had wielded over her for decades. To this day, some fans romanticize Berry and Diana's connection as a love story that launched one of the greatest careers in music. But those who saw the inner workings of Motown tell a very different tale, one of manipulation disguised as mentorship, romance tangled with career control, and emotional abuse masked by fame. Behind every spotlight is a shadow, and in the shadow of Diana's rise stood Florence Ballard, the voice who helped create the Supremes but was slowly pushed out, silenced, and forgotten. While Berry Gordy may have been the mastermind behind Motown, it was clear that Diana Ross was his favorite. And when Berry played favorites, it meant that others, especially Florence Ballard, were often pushed aside. Florence had already been struggling. She was no longer a Supreme, and her career had taken a hit. But even outside of the spotlight, she still found herself on the receiving end of Motown's politics. One night, Mary Wilson invited her to a party at Berry Gordy's mansion. Florence, who was 7 months pregnant with twins, wasn't sure if she should go. But Berry's own brother, Fuller Gordy, told her she was welcome. So she decided to attend, hoping it would be a chance to reconnect with old friends. But the moment Diana saw her, things changed. Florence felt a tug on her coat, Diana trying to get her attention. It wasn't a full confrontation, but Florence still told her not to do it again.
And I had on this long fall, and I felt somebody jerking. And I turned around, Diane pulled the fall. And so I looked at her, and I told her, don't do it again.
Not long after, Diana went to Berry. Maybe she thought Florence showing up would cause tension. Maybe she felt like it wasn't the right time or place. Either way, Berry didn't hesitate to step in.
So he came over and he told me, he said, you have to leave. You weren't invited anyway. I was about 7 months pregnant.
Florence was stunned. She had been told she was welcome. And now, at 7 months pregnant, she was being told to go. She didn't move right away, standing her ground. But Berry made it clear that there was no room for discussion.
So he came back around. He said to me, he says, I thought I told you to leave. He said, but since you haven't, I'll have you thrown out.
Florence had no choice but to get up and go. This moment showed just how much control Diana had over Berry. It didn't matter that Florence was 7 months pregnant. It didn't matter that Berry's own brother, Fuller Gordy, had welcomed her. If Diana wanted her gone, Berry made sure it happened. The betrayal was clear. And it wasn't the first time. Florence Ballard had every reason to despise Berry Gordy. She saw how he played favorites. She saw how he underpaid his artists while Motown raked in millions. And most of all, she saw how he let Diana Ross step all over her. Even when Florence was still in the Supremes, the tension was obvious. When Berry started pushing Diana Ross to the front, Florence noticed, and she had no problem speaking on it. You see, everything changed in 1963 when Berry Gordy made Diana Ross the lead singer. It was a controversial decision. Florence had always been the powerhouse vocalist, but Ross had a softer, more pop-friendly voice that Gordy believed would be more commercially successful. And he was right. In 1964, Where Did Our Love Go became their first #1 hit on the Billboard Hot 100.
You came into my heart so tenderly.
From that point on, the Supremes became unstoppable. Between 1964 and 1967, they scored 10 more #1 hits, making them Motown's biggest act and one of the most successful female groups in history. They perfected their live performances, working with choreographer Charlie Atkins and music director Maurice King, turning their shows into polished, high-energy productions. But as the Supremes' star rose, Florence started to feel left behind. She had once been the group's leader, the one who started it all, and now she was being pushed into the background. She resented the way Berry Gordy favored Diana Ross, giving her the best songs and more attention. The tension between the three women grew, and soon Florence turned to alcohol to cope. Her drinking became more frequent, and it started affecting her performances. She began missing rehearsals, showing up late, and getting into arguments with Ross and Wilson. Gordy's patience was wearing thin. When Florence missed shows or recording sessions, Motown quietly replaced her with Marlene Barrow from the Andantes. By April 1967, things were spiraling out of control. Cindy Birdsong from Patti LaBelle and the Bluebells was brought in as a stand-in for Flo, but Flo didn't realize that her days in the group were already numbered. On July 1st, 1967, one day after her 24th birthday, Florence performed with the Supremes for the last time at the Flamingo in Las Vegas. She had been drinking before the show, and when she stepped on stage, it was clear she wasn't herself. She wore a suit that didn't fit right, with a noticeable stomach bulge, and her performance was erratic. Berry Gordy had seen enough. He ordered her to leave immediately and return to Detroit. Just like that, her time in the Supremes was over. Cindy Birdsong was officially named her replacement.
Well, I guess he knew how to get to me because he wanted, which he always said, he wanted to control me. And if he couldn't control me, then he didn't want me around.
At the same time, Florence had begun an affair with Tommy Chapman, one of Berry's chauffeurs. They were inseparable, and she didn't seem to care that people were talking. Eventually, they got married. But while her personal life changed, her drinking only got worse. She missed another show after being found drunk in bed, and it was clear that she was in free fall. Her appearance changed. She wore harsh makeup, dark sunglasses, and seemed to be trying to hide from the world. For the first time, she even drank before going on stage. That was the final straw. Berry Gordy demanded she be removed from the group. A few days later, Florence Ballard was officially fired from the Supremes. Florence Ballard's downfall was one of Motown's earliest tragedies, but it wouldn't be the last. Years later, another woman would go head-to-head with Berry Gordy. She wasn't from Detroit. She wasn't even black. But her voice shook Motown to its core, and when she spoke up, Berry tried to silence her too. Her name was Teena Marie, Mary Christine Brockert, better known by her stage name, Teena Marie, remains one of the most unique and underestimated legends in the history of soul, R&B, and funk music. A white woman with a voice that could match and often surpass the power, depth, and richness of her black contemporaries, Teena Marie didn't just make music. She made history. Her journey through the music industry was one of raw talent, cultural fusion, legal reform, and undeniable soul. Born on March 5, 1956 in Santa Monica, California, Teena was raised in a multicultural neighborhood in Venice. She grew up deeply immersed in black culture, especially the music of artists like Aretha Franklin, Minnie Riperton, and James Brown. By her teens, she had a deep appreciation for jazz, soul, and gospel, genres traditionally dominated by black musicians. These were not just styles to her. They were languages she spoke fluently, emotionally, and authentically. And when she opened her mouth to sing, it shocked everyone. Her big break came in the late 1970s when she was signed to Motown Records, a powerhouse label famous for black music legends like Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye, Smokey Robinson, and the Supremes. Teena was one of the very few white artists on the label, and that fact alone made her career an experiment in racial perception and musical boundaries. In 1979, she released her debut album, Wild and Peaceful. It featured the electrifying single, I'm a Sucker for Your Love, a duet with none other than Rick James, who would become both her mentor and creative partner. The song climbed the Billboard R&B charts, reaching the top 10, and immediately proved that Teena Marie wasn't a novelty. She was the real deal. But what stunned listeners even more than her voice was the mystery surrounding her image. In an unprecedented move, Berry Gordy, Motown's founder, chose to exclude Teena's photo from the album cover. Why? He believed that if audiences saw a white woman's face before hearing the music, they might reject her out of racial bias. Gordy wanted the world to fall in love with her sound first, and they did. Many listeners were convinced that the singer behind those powerful vocals had to be black. When the truth came out, it only deepened the respect for her authenticity. Later that year, Teena shattered another barrier by becoming the first white female artist to appear on the legendary television show Soul Train. The show, which showcased black artists and culture, had never seen anyone like her. But she wasn't just accepted, she was embraced. Her performances radiated passion and soul, and her deep respect for black culture made it clear she wasn't trying to appropriate anything. She was simply being who she was. Her collaborations with Rick James continued to blaze trails. The chemistry between them was undeniable, both musically and emotionally. Together, they created timeless hits like Fire and Desire, a sensual ballad that remains one of the most iconic R&B duets of all time. Their partnership was complex, filled with rumors of love, creative tension, and occasional conflict, but it was also magical. Rick once described Teena as his musical twin. As Teena Marie's career progressed into the early 1980s, her artistry grew. She wasn't just a singer, she wrote, composed, produced, and played instruments on her records, making her one of the few women in the industry at that time to take full control of her musical output. Albums like Lady T and It Must Be Magic earned her critical acclaim and a loyal fan base.
You say my kisses taste like magic. Well, stop! That's got to be the classic line.
Songs like Square Biz and Portuguese Love showcased her versatility, blending funk, jazz, and poetic rap long before it became mainstream. But behind the scenes, a battle was brewing. In 1982, Teena found herself in a legal war with Motown. Despite her growing success, the label refused to release her new music, essentially keeping her under contract but on pause, unable to share her work with the world. Many artists had faced this kind of corporate limbo before, but none had fought it the way Teena did. She took Motown to court, and what followed was a landmark case that would change the music industry forever. Known as the Brockert Initiative, the result of the lawsuit created new legal protections for recording artists. It prevented record labels from holding artists hostage, keeping them under contract without releasing their music or allowing them to sign elsewhere. The case became a legal precedent that protected countless artists in the years that followed, including big names like Luther Vandross and the Mary Jane Girls. Teena's courage in standing up to one of the most powerful labels in music history not only freed her creatively, but also helped generations of musicians gain more control over their careers. After leaving Motown, Teena signed with Epic Records and continued her success. Her 1984 album, Star Child, featured Lover Girl, which became her biggest commercial hit, reaching the top 5 on the Billboard Hot 100. It marked her transition from a cult R&B favorite to a full-blown pop star, without ever losing her soulful edge. Throughout her career, Teena remained deeply connected to the Black community. She was godmother to Rick James's daughter and considered many Black musicians and artists her closest friends. Her loyalty, respect, and immersion in the culture went beyond music. It was part of who she was. Unlike many artists accused of cultural appropriation, Teena Marie lived what she sang. In the 2000s, after a brief hiatus, she returned to music with renewed energy, signing with Cash Money Records and releasing albums like La Doña and Sapphire, which were well received and proved she hadn't lost a step. Teena Marie passed away suddenly on December 26, 2010, at the age of 54. In any case, without Berry Gordy, there is no bad boy. That isn't just a compliment, it is a confession. Sean Diddy Combs didn't just admire Berry Gordy, he copied him. The way Berry built Motown, Diddy built Bad Boy Entertainment the same way, only flashier, louder, and with hip-hop at the center. But the dark blueprint remained the same. Like Gordy, Diddy didn't just sign artists. He owned their images, their branding, their movements. He chose their wardrobes. He dictated their beefs. He handpicked who got studio time and who got buried. When artists pushed back like Total, Day 26, or Danity Kane, Diddy used the same playbook Gordy used: silence them, blacklist them, replace them. Just like Berry Gordy allegedly manipulated Diana Ross's career to center on control, Diddy has been accused of romantic coercion and emotional manipulation with his female artists. And just like Gordy's inner circle whispered about blacklisting and secrecy, Diddy's empire has been rocked by near-identical allegations in recent years. From former artists, employees, and even lawsuits. Even the language is the same. Both men were closely connected to Clive Davis, the legendary executive who helped build Arista Records. Berry launched acts that Clive would later sign, and decades later, Diddy launched Bad Boy under Clive Davis at Arista. The bridge between Motown and Bad Boy wasn't accidental. It was orchestrated. Diddy even inherited Gordy's method of grooming artists from the inside. His right-hand man, Harve Pierre, adopted the same strategy. Isolate talent, control them, and repackage them for maximum profit. But the similarities don't stop at business. Both men became symbols of power, yet their shadows were lined with tragedy. Gordy had Florence Ballard's downfall. Diddy has Kim Porter's mysterious death, the alleged abuse of Cassie, and multiple federal investigations. And now, just like Gordy's inner circle remained tight-lipped for decades, Diddy's circle is cracking open, with former friends, employees, and lovers coming forward. Diddy didn't just follow Berry Gordy's blueprint, he became it. But in an era with social media and instant receipts, the consequences are finally catching up. What Motown got away with in silence, Bad Boy is facing in public. And perhaps the most chilling part? This cycle of mentorship turned manipulation, of fame tied to silence, didn't end with Berry. It was reborn in Diddy. And it's still happening. Berry Gordy's influence didn't stop with Motown. It spread, like roots from a tree, into the next generation of music. And if you follow those roots, they lead straight to people like Diddy, Jay-Z, and yes, even Beyoncé. Let's talk about Diana Ross first. She didn't just become a superstar under Berry Gordy. She became the blueprint. And over time, people started to notice that Beyoncé seemed to follow that same path. The controlled image, the carefully planned solo career, the tight circle, it all felt familiar. There have been rumors for years that Diana Ross mentored Beyoncé behind the scenes. And honestly, it shows. Beyoncé's career is nearly spotless. Every move she makes is calculated, just like Diana's was back in the day. Then there's Jay-Z, who worked with Clive Davis, the same guy who helped both Berry and Diddy. Jay and Beyoncé built their empire with the same rules Berry set decades ago. Control everything, speak only when necessary, and keep power in the family. But here's the thing, all that power, it comes at a cost. We remember Diana and Beyoncé, but we forget about Florence Ballard, Teena Marie, Cassie, Mace, the people who didn't make it out of the machine. What some call mentorship might really be control passed from one powerful person to the next. And that same system, it's still alive today, just wearing a different outfit. Anyway, that's it for this video, folks. Bye.